I'm Roxana Montoya. Today I will be presenting Chapter 25, The Americas and Oceania, from the book Traditions and Encounters. This is for my AP World History class, and let's get started. So basically this chapter is divided in 3 sections, which are Colliding Worlds, Colonial Society in the Americas, and Europeans in the Pacific. I will only be presenting 2 of them, Colonial Society in the Americas and Europeans in the Pacific, because my classmate will be doing Colliding Worlds. The European migrants who flooded into the Western Hemisphere, which is basically the Americas, interacted both with the native inhabitants of the Americas and with African peoples, whom they imported as enslaved laborers. Throughout the Americas, relations between individuals of American, European, and African ancestry soon led to the emergence of mestizo population. Yet, European peoples increasingly dominated political and economic affairs in the Americas. They mined precious metals and cultivated cash crops like sugar and tobacco. So now we're going to talk about the formation of multicultural societies. Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca was a Spanish nobleman who joined an expedition of some 300 explorers who went from Hispaniola to investigate Florida in 1527. Disaster struck when the strong current of the Mississippi River pushed the flotilla into the Gulf and a fierce storm destroyed the makeshift vessels. Cabeza de Vaca and a small group of survivors soon fell captive to native inhabitants. For the next 8 years, Cabeza de Vaca and 3 companions lived in several different societies, serving sometimes as slaves and sometimes as physicians before finding their way to Mexico in 1536. All European territories became multicultural societies where peoples of varied ancestry lived together under European or Euro-American dominance. Most Spanish migrants went to Mexico, where there was soon a growing population of mestizos. In both the Spanish and Portuguese colonies, migrants born in Europe, known as peninsulares, stood at the top of the social hierarchy, followed by criollos or creoles, who were individuals born in the Americas with Spanish ancestry. Meanwhile, mulattoes, zambos, and other individuals of mixed percentage became prominent groups in Brazilian society. The social structure of the French and English colonies in North America differed markedly from Iberian colonies. French fur traders often associated with native women and generated metis, the French equivalent of mestizos. Economically, a big deal was mining and agriculture in the Spanish Empire. Silver was more plentiful than gold, and it was the basis of the new Spanish world wealth. The 2 major sites of silver mining were Zacatecas in Mexico and Potosí in Peru. Silver was very significant globally. 1/5 of all silver mining went to Royal Spanish Treasury. That was called El Quinto. There were also large private estates known as haciendas. They were basically the basis of Spanish American production. The major source of labor for the haciendas was the indigenous population. Spanish conquerors first organized native workforces under the encomienda system. The Portuguese Empire entirely depended on sugar production, and because they needed to produce so much sugar, it was only economical if they were able to get free labor, which then resulted in slavery. Also, smallpox and measles reduced indigenous population in Brazil. Now moving on to fur trade and settlers in North America. The fur trade generated tremendous conflict. It also took place in the context of competition between European states. Socially, Christianity and native religions in the Americas also grew as well. Spanish missionaries introduced Catholicism to indigenous peoples. Mission schools and churches were established. In 1531, the Virgin of Guadalupe became the national symbol of Mexico. And lastly, we're going to talk about the Europeans in the Pacific. Dutch mariners explored West Australia during the 17th century. They didn't find any spices or farmland, so Australia held little interest until the 18th century. British captain James Cook explored East Australia in 1770. In 1788, England established the first settlement in Australia as a penal colony. So moving on, we're going to talk about the Pacific Islands and the larger world. In 1521, Ferdinand Magellan and his crew became the first Europeans to cross the Pacific Ocean. In 1575, Spanish mariners inaugurated the Manila Galleon trade between Manila and Acapulco because their primary goal was to link New Spain to Asian markets. By the early 19th century, European and Euro-American peoples had become prominent figures in all the major Pacific Island groups. During the 19th and 20th centuries, interactions between islanders, visitors, and migrants brought rapid and often unsettling change to the Pacific Island societies. And that was Colonial Society in the Americas and Europeans in the Pacific by Roxana Montoya for my AP World History class.